Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nathan Ross. I am the project coordinator of the Community Champions Network with NACAC. I would like to thank you all for joining our webinar on rejuvenating support groups presented by Diane Martin-Hushman. Just a real quick housekeeping thing. If you have any questions, there is a box for questions in your control panel. You can just put your questions in there and Diane will take those at the end of her presentation. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, you can also just put those in there and we'll keep track of those and look for them, and if we need to stop for any reason, we will. With that covered, I think I will go ahead and turn it over to Diane.
All right, thank you, Nathan. Welcome to all of you folks. We have people online from New Jersey to California, from British Columbia to Nova Scotia. So it's exciting to have all of you here. About half of our participants are child welfare professionals, and about half of our folks are support group leaders. My assumption is that probably some of you wear both hats and are both a parent and a professional, or a parent that's running a support group. So again, I welcome you. Okay. I'm Diane Martin-Hushman. I have worked with NACAC for about 13 years now. Right now I'm working with the Community Champions Family Support Network. And what we do is we do webinars like these, but we also offer services to groups across the country to help them rejuvenate or start their groups, or many other things, such as looking at Facebook, looking at creating a website, doing youth work, all of those great things. If you want to learn more about how we can help you, please feel free to go to the NACAC website and go to CCN, and there you can fill out, there will be a site where you can fill out a survey monkey to look at those issues and look at those things that we're doing. In reference to support groups, before joining NACAC, I worked in therapeutic foster care, and I had a support group on a regular basis there with the foster parents that I worked with. I've also been involved with parent support groups as a parent. I am the adoptive parent of 6 kids, and when we were raising our kids, we adopted a sibling group of 3. And I really believe that my support group helped me save one of my kids from disrupting. And so I've always really believed in the power of support groups. I've also been a foster parent and a kinship parent, so I walked the walk for a long time, and I really am excited about being part of talking with you about rejuvenating your parent support groups. This is just a piece about this webinar. It talks to you if you have questions, go to the question box, type those in, and we'll work with those there. As you know, you're muted already. That's very strange for me because I've presented across the country, and I don't very often have an audience that doesn't talk to me, so it's pretty strange. So you can look at that and read about this webinar. So when I talk about support groups, I always say to people, why would people want to come to your support group anyway? And I hear all kinds of different things. It might be because you have great support and that you're really there and you go the extra mile for people. It may be that you have great education. It may be that you know how to laugh with each other and you have fun and you enjoy those kinds of things. It may be that your kids have been involved with the youth support group and that they really like coming and being with other kids that are a part of the foster adopter kinship network. But those things are important to ask. Why would people come to this support group? Another important question is, what are their needs? Are we meeting the needs of our people? And we're going to talk more about that as we talk about assessments and look at that for a minute. So then I say to people, okay, why don't you ask people, what are the 4 top reasons that they're going to come to your support group? And then I think we have to ask about, what are we not doing well? What would we do what would we wish that we could do better? How do we change things so we can improve what we're already doing? And that's an important piece to ask as well. There's some research out there that helps us look at support groups, and here is just some of the reasons for involvement in groups. People say they want to go to groups for information. Could be information about tax credit, could be information about how to discipline differently. It could be that they just need other people that have walked their walk and that they need some support from those folks. Another thing that happens is it normalizes some of our feelings about adoption. Sometimes it's really hard, and we thought we were going to do this good thing, and we need to talk with people about that who have had that same experience. So we want to share our experiences. We want to laugh with other people about some of our experiences. We want to say, has this ever happened to you, and how did you deal with it? We want to get that advice from the people that are a little bit more seasoned than us so that they can say to us, don't worry about it. It's going to be okay. We want to socialize with other people that are walking this walk, and we want to not be isolated. I see here a lot of parents that are really isolated in their journey with foster, adopt, and kinship. And they need other people around them to not feel so isolated. So I talk about you gotta believe, because I really believe in support groups. As I said before, one of my kids would have disrupted had I not had a support group. There's some research out there that really looks at the value of support group. Smith and Howard did some really nice work. Smith and Howard is from Illinois. And have done a lot of research over the years around adoption issues. And one of the things they found out was when they asked for their reports back was it was more helpful, support groups were more helpful than family therapy. That's pretty profound if you think about it for a minute. Rick Delaney, who again has been around for a long time, talks about that support groups normalize the experience of adoption. They help parents to set more realistic expectations, which is very important. And one of the reasons that disruptions happen is because people have such high expectations. They help people prepare for a crisis. I remember one time talking about preparing for a crisis and talking about I had a runner, and I talked about how do I teach my child to run responsibly, because we're living in Minnesota and they need to be able to run responsibly. They help, Delaney talks about the support groups offer innovative strategies, other ways of looking at things. Sometimes when we're in the depth of things, we can't see what's really going on. The Child Welfare Information Gateway talks about our parents feeling less isolated, more empowered, and more confident. This is some of the research that I really like out of the state of Virginia. They evaluated 500 families who identified what are some of the most important services for them. The first thing they wrote was parent-to-parent support, that they needed other parents around them to talk about what are some of the tough things that go on. Secondly, they said respite. We need a break. We need a break from our kids, and we need for our kids to have a break from us once in a while. And thirdly, they talked about adoption-competent mental health professionals or child welfare practitioners. And that is being addressed across the country as well. There's also been some other research that's went on. The New York Coalition talked about 82% said they were better off and happier after using support group services. And here in Minnesota, we did some research. 91% of the parents said that helped them to be more prepared to parent their children and find resources after being part of support group services. So it's important that we provide those services for families. When I look at post-adoption services, I really look at support groups as intervention. And I like to look at post-adoption services in a V shape, with crisis support being at the bottom and information and referral at the top. As an old professional, I always say, and I always think about, if we provide parents and families with the first four, information and referral, parent support group networks, training, and youth support, then we deal less with clinical service and crisis support. I feel very strongly that the top four are much more cost-effective than the clinical services and crisis supports, and I've seen it played out in my practice. If we provide services early on, if we provide services that are not so intense, we often don't have to use the higher intensity of services. So this is in reference to post-adoption support that NACAC has run this program for about 15 years with the Minnesota Department of Human Services. This is a parent-to-parent support program, and what we've learned over those years is that connecting with support early is incredibly important for our parents. Not waiting until a crisis happens, not waiting until you're ready to have that child moved, but you really encourage people to get in that group, get with other parents early on. We've also learned that being with other adoptive families is normal and is normalizing, and so how can we help that happen for our parents? We know that parents learn from each other. The other thing we've really learned in the last 15 years is that technology often offers a new way to connect. We have a Facebook group here at NACAC that works with folks in Minnesota across the state. It's a wonderful opportunity for people to talk with, to get their problems out there right away, and to learn from each other. We think our experience with that is wonderful, and if you're interested, CCN can help you set up a Facebook group as well. And we've also learned that partnering with others really increases outreach to families. That when families can connect with other families, when they can get a telephone number or they can get an email, and they can call other people who are dealing with a child that has fetal alcohol syndrome or dealing with a child that has some major issues, and they can deal with other families that are dealing with those kinds of things. It's an incredible support to those families. So I want to talk a little bit more about how important it is to assess our group. Why do we assess our group? We want to learn more about our group. We don't know what all's going on, and we become aware after an assessment of a group about some other issues that might be going on. We need to document what those parents' needs are. And then we need to take action plans to be able to service our parents and to help them get what they've asked for. So I like to say to people, what are your parents' needs? Is your meeting at the right time? Are you providing childcare? Is your education topic really hitting for what people want? Do they have opportunities to socialize and to build relationships with each other? I talk about the 3 F's when I talk about parent support group. Some of the things we need to offer our families are fun. I think we need to be able to laugh and have fun when we're at support groups. I think we need to often have to offer food. Food is a great socializer, and it brings people in. And the third thing I think of the 3 F's is family, that we need to offer children or youth programs that are part of our support groups so that our families can come. So I'm saying to you, take time to do some assessment. Take time to do some assessment of your groups. Here at NACAC, we often use survey monkeys to find out what information we need to find out from different groups. Another type of way to get an assessment is to do a focus group. Focus groups are often, you get immediate results. You sit down with people, you're able to kind of work things through a little bit more sometimes than you do with a survey monkey. There's also, you can do a telephone calling. I don't know if any of you have the Starting and Nurturing Adoptive Parent Groups, a guide for leaders. It's a a blue and green guide that NACAC has had for a very long time. It's on our website, but if you would like a hard copy of that, please let us know and we'll go ahead and send that to you. But in the back of that, we have several surveys in it, but in the back of that is a group member telephone survey. And I would encourage you to go to that. And, you know, from NACAC we always say steal shamelessly. So take this, readjust it, make it work for your group. And that's another option, to do a telephone survey, so you have that kind of an assessment of your group. The other thing is just to send out some kind of a questionnaire. What are your needs? How can we help you? We're going to start a new program this fall. What are some of the things that we can learn from and we can use? I just attended the Child Welfare League of America conference on kinship in just very recently in September. And one of the sessions, workshops that I went to, they were talking about a program that they're doing in kinship, and it's called a GROW, G-R-O-W, support group scale. And if you want to learn more about that, it's in the Grand Families Journal. Again, the Grand Families Journal. It was with kinship folks. But it's just another way to look at how do we assess people's needs so that we can provide the services that our people are needing. Going on, so what do you do with this assessment? I think it's really important that you get an assessment and then you tabulate the results. You look at the opportunities and the responsibilities to put it into use. How do we set up a program that's going to be a program that our people are going to attend and that they want? And then I would encourage kind of a step-by-step of looking that over and saying, okay, we have this assessment. This is the steps we're going to take to set that up. Also in your manual, it talks about group tasks. And when it talks about group tasks, it means that you're not going to do everything yourself, but you're going to have different people working for you. So that is actually on page 28 of the green and blue manual. But it talks about things like, what is the task? Who are the people that are responsible? What is the beginning date? What is the ending date? And what is the outcome? Again, a way of tracking what you're doing and how you're going to do that. One of the ways that I think to help rejuvenate groups is really to create a yearly schedule. I think that it's real, and we're not too late to do this right now. People need to look at things on a yearly basis so that they can get it on their calendar, so that they can plan around it, so that it can be a part of what they're going to do for the next year. And I also think that we need to recreate a schedule on a yearly basis. Don't keep doing the same things over and over, but try to create a schedule that's going to offer the opportunities to your people that they're going to want. Some of the things that I might talk about is that you might plan both educational and social opportunities. I'm going to talk some more about that. I also think it's important to talk with people about what are they willing to do. How can they help us? How can they be a part of what's going on? And then what other special skills are in the group membership? The more you get people involved, the more they're going to be able to say, this is my group, and I want this group to go well. So one of the things okay, so let me just give you an idea here of this yearly calendar. One of the ideas that I have for this yearly calendar is that you really need to do things as situations are happening for family. So in October, I often work on back-to-school issues. This is time when you might be looking at an individual education program. This is time when your kids, by October, your kids are, if they're in a regular classroom, they might be starting to have lots of problems. How do you address those problems? Where do you go for those issues? So in October, I usually say, okay, can we talk about school issues? It's an important piece to go where people are. In November, I often talk about holiday stress. We're coming into the holidays. Our kids often act and react to things that have happened in the past around holidays, so let's talk about that. In December, I like to have fun. I think there's a lot of stress around the holidays. I want to say, what kind of things can we do to have as much fun as we can possibly have? In February, I might talk about taking care of the caregiver. We might have a retreat. We might have an opportunity for families to go together off someplace to have some fun together. In March, it's right around tax season, so I would encourage you to bring in somebody that can talk about the adoption tax credit, how it works, how it can benefit people, what kind of things they can do with that. So again, I'm encouraging you to say one of the ways of rejuvenating our group is to create a yearly calendar. When I talk about taking care of our people and rejuvenating, I often talk about support, socialization, and education in reference to support groups. Socialization is huge, and when families first come into a group, any of you that are starting new groups, we really want to get rid of what I call some of that primary tension. Right at the beginning of a support group, we need to figure out ways for those families to interact without sharing everything. So, family picnics, family sporting events where kids would play soccer or whatever, back to school events where you would have fun with those kinds of things. I also think it's important to honor your members so that at some time, if you could have a banquet or some small gifts, some of those kinds of things, socialization events again, to bring forth the people that are helping you, the people that are really putting out to help this group make this group work. Honor the members in your group. The other socialization thing I talk about is cultural events. My children are adopted transracially, so one of the things that I think is really important is we have done, and within the support groups that I work with, we do cultural things. It's coming up to the holidays now. Maybe as a group we should do some Kwanzaa stuff. Think about cultural events that might be an opportunity for your group to have fun together, to enjoy each other, and to play together. Education is huge, and I can't tell you how important it is to provide education for our families. But I think, again, we need to say, what are some things that our people are dealing with? In our Adopt Talk, and again, this is a rich resource for you, NACAC puts out a quarterly newsletter called the Adopt Talk, and if you go on the NACAC website, you can go to Publications and then go to Adopt Talk, and it offers all of the parenting publications that we've had in the Adopt Talk for many years and many years back. Pull one of those out and see if that fits into talking about some of the issues that you might be looking at as far as education. When I think about loss and grief, we just did an article on, it's called the 357 model by Darla Henry. That looks about how to work with some of those issues. So that's another idea. If indeed you're thinking about doing something for November for the National Adoption Month, NACAC also has in their publications a National Adoption Awareness Month guide, which you might look at and say, okay, we can use some of these issues as well. So lots of different ideas there as to how you might think about education. Again, as I talk about creating your yearly calendar, I talk about education, I talk about socialization, and thirdly, I talk about the importance of socialization, that we need to socialize with our family. We need to have our family be a part of that. I keep seeing these questions, and I'm going to look at this one question. It says, how do you help grandparents who are feeling isolated from their own peers who no longer have young children around? You know, that's a really good question. I think that I remember when I did kinship care, it seemed like I lost a lot of my friends. And so I think that having support groups for kinship parents is crucial, because I think that that gives them another opportunity to be with people that are walking their walk. And we need to say, and we need to think about, how do we help our kinship parents be involved in support groups, but also how do we help them get some respite so that they can continue to be involved with some of the people that are important to them. So good question. I really appreciate that. Okay. So another thing that I think is really important is that you need to track and evaluate. You need to ask yourself, what has been successful? Where did we get our biggest outcome? Where were people most enjoying each other and being together? Need to look at those kinds of things. We also need to look at things like our presenters and our facilitators. Maybe our facilitator isn't doing what needs to be done, or that they're too negative, or whatever. So that we need to say, let's do some evaluation of that. Maybe we need to do some changing of all of that. Presenters. Certain presenters really draw a crowd. Which ones don't? So we need to evaluate some of those kinds of things as well. So I'm going to again send you to the blue and green book and say there is again another scale in there that looks at contact tracking. Who were the parents that came to you? Were they adoptive? Were they foster? What did they need? Did they just need to be invited to the meeting? Do they need to be paired up with a buddy? Do they need to have some questions answered? And then what kind of follow-up are you going to do with those kinds of folks? Also, there's a piece in there that looks at meeting and activities, and that is on page 30. What were the meetings? What was the purpose? What was the description? Who came? So you have some of those kinds of things as well. And that's in there for you as well. So you can use, again, steal shamelessly and use anything you want that's in this blue book. The other survey that we have in there is on page 32, and that's a training survey. It looks at who was at your training, what did they need, so that those things are there for you as well. Okay. Why do we need to do tracking and evaluation? And I would ask you this if we could talk with each other. But we need to do that so that we know what was successful. What kind of things really worked for us? What kind of things didn't work? What kind of things do we want to do differently? You also do this because if you're going to do any kind of grants or try to find any funding, you need to say to people, this has really worked. Let me show you what we did last year, and look at how many people we had coming last year. And look at the remarks of the people when they did come. So I think a little evaluation and tracking is very important for support groups to continue to grow. When I talk about support groups and rejuvenation, I like to talk about the 4 C's. We're going to talk first about communication. I think we need to get the message across very quickly that this isn't just one person's group, or this isn't the agency group. This is everybody's group. Everybody needs to be involved in this group. And then we need to look at what kind of talents and skills do people have. Sure, you might know that I'm a foster, adopter, kinship parent, but what else do you know about me? What other kind of things would be helpful for our group? Let me give you an example. One time when I was in Corpus Christi, Texas, I was working with a support group, and one of the people that was a part of the group said to me, it was sure nice to get the tax credit return. And I said, and I talked more with him, and I said, tell me about that. And he said, well, you know, I got this certain amount of money back, and that was really great. And I said, have you shared that with your group? And he said, oh, no, I haven't. I said, listen, let's share this with your group, and see if there's anybody else that needs help in figuring this out. He shared it with his group, and there were 3 other families that were able to get a tax credit return. I mean, that's phenomenal that we need to know about those talents within the other groups so that they can share those with other people. Some of our people are really know a lot about social media. Well, maybe those folks could create a website for us or run the Facebook group. We need to really look at those skills and say, what can you offer back to the group? Again, the more you have people involved, the more ownership they will have in the group. The other thing is that when you're asking for help, one of the things I say is I go directly to the person and I say, Christina, would you do the following? I don't say, will you volunteer? Because what happens, folks? Nobody raises their hand, right? We've got enough on our plate. But if I go to Christina directly and say, would you do the following? I bet that Christina would say yes. Why? Because she likes me and because she wants to support what I'm doing. We need to look for those skills and talents of the group, and then we need to say, okay, let's go to those people and ask them to help us. So communication is huge. The next thing that I talk about is connectedness. Our people need to be connected with other people. They need to share their stories. They need to share their phone numbers and their emails. They need to be able to say, I know that this person has a child that has fetal alcohol syndrome, and I'm fairly new to dealing with a child with fetal alcohol syndrome, but I know that Jenny has raised 2 kids that have fetal alcohol syndrome, and she does a great job. As a facilitator, we need to connect those people. We need to say, you know, I know that you're just beginning this journey, but I know that Jenny knows a lot about this, and I would like for the 2 of you to connect. We as facilitators need to think about how do we connect people so that they can share what they have and what the issues are. The other thing we need to do is we need to get, we're so much in social media that we need to get that out to people. It might be through a newsletter, it might be through an e-blast, it might be through a website or a blog. We need to give information to people so that they can continue to feel a part of our group. We also need to connectedness of promoting our group. We need to tell about community organizers and community organizations about we have this group. We have this group that really talks about issues of how to work with some of our kids. We have this group. We need to put our good stories in the newspaper. So whenever you see a negative story come out, you need to put a good story in, because we have a lot of good stories about our kids and our families. So do those kinds of things. Make sure that the churches know and that churches promote you. We're just starting a transracial parenting group next week here. We're doing it in a church. It's in all of the church newsletters as well, and the people of the church are invited to be a part of that group as well as the broader community. We need to promote our groups. Creativity. I think it's important to attract members that we're creative in our thinking. One of the things that I know very well is some of our houses of worship really are growing in leaps and bounds. Why are they doing that? Because, for one thing, many times they have a welcoming committee, people that meet you at the door, people that say to you, hi, nice to have you here. One of the things that our pastor, our leader, has been saying is that we've been expecting you to come. I think what a nice thing to say to people. What a welcoming thing to say to people. We need to call people after they've been there, after they've been to a meeting, and say, how did you feel? Do you feel welcome? We want you to come back again. We need to tell them when the next meeting is so that they can continue to be a part and to feel welcome. That primary tension when somebody first comes in the room and you have a whole group of people over here that know each other and I'm the only person that don't know anybody makes it very difficult if I don't have somebody that's welcoming me. So we really need to think about how do we do those kinds of things. The Connecticut Foster Parent Association has a wonderful program on creativity that does mentoring for the first year after people are placed, or after people start fostering. It's a wonderful program that really looks at how do we bring people along so that they get involved? How do we bring people along so that they're successful? Those are the kind of things we need to look at. I think another option for creativity is have a present member invite someone that they know to the gathering. We all know other people that are foster adopted kinship people. Let's invite them. Invite them into our program so that they can get to know, again, if they come with somebody else, they're going to feel more comfortable than walking in cold. So think about those kinds of things. Think about how we can reach out. The other thing with creativity that I think is just crucial, and I've said several times, is that we need to laugh and we need to have fun with each other. I don't know about you, but after parenting 6 adopted kids and being a foster parent for some 15 years, I have some great stories to tell. And I would bet the rest of you would too. So I really think it's important that we share those kinds of things with people, that we laugh about some of the interesting and crazy things that we've dealt with over the years. The other thing around creativity is that I would encourage you to think about how do we have a family retreat or a camp experience. I had the opportunity to go to Virginia to do a respite camp retreat. And what a neat opportunity for families and kids to come together. We had we stayed over 2 nights. They had opportunities to really get to know each other, to really go into much more depth as to what were some of the issues, what were some of the things going on. The kids were there too, so there was a program for the kids as well. So we not only helped the parents to get some of their education and to get some of their support, we also helped the children to be with other leaders so that the parents could have time to do that. But then what we did was we brought them together in the evening so that we didn't have to worry about the concerns of having kids at a camp that they weren't familiar with. Another idea for creativity is offer some cutting-edge training. I don't know if you've seen the National Child Trauma Stress Network puts out a wonderful 8-week series of dealing with trauma. And I am just so incredibly impressed with it. It's really written for caregivers. It could be worked into a support group. It could be said, okay, we're going to do this for a period, over a period of time. It's a wonderful piece, and I encourage you to look at that, and I've given you the website to go to. The other thing is, I often look at books. There's a great book by Jane Schooler and Betsy Keeper Smalley, which is called Wounded Children Healing Homes. The thing that I really, really like about this book, and if you haven't seen the book, it's a wonderful book for support groups, because they just have a chapter, and then at the end of the chapter they have key points, and they have some wonderful questions that could be brought out in a support group. So again, look at how you can be creative, look at some of the stuff that's out there, and respond to the needs that you hear in your groups. The other thing I think that is really important is to be able to change. I don't know about you, but I think we have to step up to the plate to be able to change to meet the needs of the community. Sometimes we get really into the perspective of, well, we've always done it this way. And that really puts a monkey wrench, from my perspective, into growth, into change. We need to think about how can we do it different. Maybe we don't have the kind of leaders we should have. Maybe we need to think about this differently. So I put below there the types of groups that we often look at across the country. Mainly groups start as a venting group. I sometimes call it a bitching group. But we want to move on from there. We want to move into mutual support so that they can really be supporting each other, offering solutions. I often say to people, okay, we've heard about your problem. Now let's stop and allow some people to give you some ideas. So we need to help people move out of the venting into getting some ideas to take care of themselves. There are lots and lots of service groups around the area. Some of our groups have decided that when children are placed, they need some clothing right away. And so that we often have to say, okay, maybe we need to start a little clothing bank here with our support group. Some of our groups are advocacy groups. There are issues, there are huge issues out there that need to be addressed in an advocacy group. I always say, you know, you have the power of a group. So when 4 or 5 or 8 or 10 or 20 or 30 or 100 people are grown to gathered together, you have the opportunity for advocacy. And so oftentimes our groups will move into an advocacy issue when there's a huge issue there. It might be such an issue as to just getting the medical card. That might be a huge issue within your group. It might be that the subsidy is being really cut and you need an advocacy group for that. Some of our groups have moved on to what I call post-permanency agencies. And I'm going to just do a little talking about one of those agencies. I don't know if you know, but NACAC started as a parent support group many, many years ago, and now we're a full-blown agency. This is another agency that started as a support group. And when I first knew this agency back in the early 2001, it was a very small group. It was a parent support group that were working together. Today, this is the Missouri Foster Care Association, Adoption Association. Today, they have approximately 850 people that they support, foster, adopt, and kinship. They offer wonderful programs of advocacy and support. They do a parent mentoring program. They have many support groups. Some support groups are very specific to the kinds of needs, such as there's a RAD group. There's also a GLBT group. They do a lot of sharing and information with those 850 families, as well as continuing to have a clothing and a food pantry. So again, is this your group? Will you become this kind of a huge group? I don't know, but that's an opportunity for you to think about how are we offering people services? How are they getting the services that they might need? And groups like this are providing those kinds of things. So again, I'm going to talk a little bit about change. I think you need to look at how the community that you're working with has changed. What I see is I have some groups across the country that are doing group meetings for like a whole day on Saturday or a half day on Saturday, and then at the other times they're connecting by Facebook. I have some other groups that are saying, we are a specialty group and we really want to deal with fetal alcohol syndrome kids, and so we have a group that's just doing that. We have other groups that are dealing with older kids and that are doing advocacy across their area and learning more and more about how the importance of young people sharing what they know with other people, sharing what they know with each other, helping each other to become who they are becoming. Nathan introduced us here, but Nathan has done some wonderful work around youth group and youth advocacy groups, and I would really encourage you again to go to the CCN website or to the NACAC website and say, we need somebody to come in and work with us on youth development, and see if Nathan can fill in and can help you with some of those things. That's part of what CCN offers. So I encourage you to look at that. Sometimes we need to change. We've been an adoption group, and we've been an adoption group. We're starting to get a lot of our families are foster to adopt. Does that make a difference? Do we need to do something different with that kind of a group? Those are things we need to be asking ourselves as we're thinking about how do we assess our group so that we can become the kind of group that our parents need. Some of the other issues I think that are really important that you need to look at is whose group is this anyway? I have talked a lot over the last several years about the kind of groups that I think are the most successful. I really believe that parents need to be a part of facilitating groups. that parent-run groups or parent-run agency-supported groups are very important. Let me give you a little insight into that. When I was doing therapeutic foster care, I was a caseworker. And when I had a support group on a regular basis, when I started facilitating that group with a parent and myself, the group was really changed. And then I started saying, okay, I will be there as the agency person for the first half hour, and then I will leave, and the parents can run the group. And that I will be your resource, I will be your backup person, but that you really need to say this is a parent group and that your parents are running this group. I tell you, it was amazing what happened as a caseworker. My caseload, many of the people were dealing with issues with each other rather than having to call a caseworker. They were having less crisis. And I just seen a real difference in people wanting and feeling like this group is our group. I really like this group. We can do what we need to do here as parents helping each other. I think agencies need to be involved with this. I'm not saying agencies don't need to be involved. But if you're going to have an agency-run group, I would really encourage you to say, how can we get our parents involved? How can we have co-facilitation so that the agency can have a parent that is running that group as well, or co-facilitating that group with another professional. That might be my bias. I don't know. I just see that that's what's worked best for me over the years, and I encourage you to think about that perspective. Another issue I think that is really important is facilitation. Groups don't run by themselves. We need to really facilitate a group. We need to have somebody there that really believes in the cause, that's able to ask questions, be willing to change, somebody that is able to have a sense of humor, that can grab the audience and say, and be able to say to people, okay, you've vented, now we need to get you back here so that we can be able to help you. That we need to have somebody that really can find a balance for this position and really be able to be there for the group. I know many professionals do a group as at the end of the day, and they're so tired. I'm saying that this is really work to facilitate a group. I would really encourage you to take some time for yourself before your group starts so that you're really clear of what you're going to do and how you're going to facilitate. The other thing I think is really important is that facilitators need to be not be afraid to talk about difficult situations. Two areas that really are difficult situations are allegations and disruptions. If you're dealing with people that have experienced those kinds of things, we really need to facilitate and to help those people move on from there. We lose a lot of people around allegations and disruptions. And I think it's a huge area, and I could do a lot more talking about that. But if you're interested, I have written an article on allegations and how to be proactive with allegations. So that's available for you. Facilitating purposeful, engaging activities through the life of a group is an absolute necessity. And that's what I'm trying to say to you, is that we really need to facilitate purposeful, engaging activities. Don't do something just to be doing it. Do something because this is what your community has asked for, this is what they have said their need is, and this is what we want to be able to help them to do. When we have our meetings, again, I think it's important to be able to have healthy meetings. Healthy meetings for me are that we start with a beginning, we have a middle, and we have an ending. When we talk about beginning meetings, I think it's important that we get people to relax. I think it's important that we have some mixers. There's a whole piece of icebreakers on icebreaker.com or icebreaker.ws. It can be such a simple thing as standing in a circle, and then we say, okay, how many of us have this kind of an issue? How many of us have this kind of children? That we then step into the circle. We might say from 1 to 10, how is your month went? How are you doing and why? Maybe share that a little bit. Sometimes we do fun kind of things that we get to know each other. But what I know about group facilitation is that we need to engage people in the first 5 minutes, or we often lose them. The other thing that's really important in that beginning is we talk about confidentiality. What's said in here stays in here. We don't need it all over the community. It's going to be in this area. Secondly, we need to say that if indeed there is something that we feel might be an allegation or that might be abusive, that we need to report that, because we are mandatory reporters, especially child professionals, and I think within a group that's part of your job. The other thing in the middle, I think it's really important that we take time to support each other as well as give information. I detest meetings that we go to that you just get information, and you have no opportunity to share and to talk. I think that even when we have an education event, we need to take time to talk and to ask questions and to allow people to support each other and to talk about what is that and how does that affect me. Finally, I think we need to send folks home feeling positive and wanting to come back. I often talk about affirmations. I will allow the group to say affirmations to each other. I will encourage them to say, I really appreciate your being so honest. I really appreciate your talking about how you handle that. That gives me some new insight. I think we need to talk about what we could do better. What were the things that we could do better, and what do we want to bring into our next meeting? And then we always need to close with telling people, this is where we're going to meet next time. And I think it's always helpful to have meetings at the same place. If you move from home to home, that's okay, but you need to be able to say at this meeting where that next meeting is. Okay, some of the stumbling stones that I see as to why groups are not successful. Personal and interpersonal relationships that are damaging and not dealt with. If you have some folks that seem to be having some real trouble with each other and you're the facilitator, pull them aside and say, hey, I see some tension here. How can we work on this? How can we deal with this? This seems to be affecting our group. I don't want it to affect our group. What can we do to make things change? Another stumbling stone that I see is overdependence on a leader. I think that having 2 co-leaders, 2 co-facilitators is hugely important. You know, we all have crises, and if I have a crisis and I leave and I'm the only leader, then our group often falls apart. I've seen that happen many times. So it's really important that we have what I call a core circle of leaders, people that are going to be there every time, that are going to step up to the plate to take over if somebody else isn't there. I think that a stumbling stone is lack of support within group, lack of trust within the group and the agency. That needs to be dealt with. And you need to say, how am I going to deal with this? What kind of things do we need to do to develop trust within our group? I also think that sometimes groups just go on without identifying and securing resources for the groups. We need to say, what kind of things will bring some life into the group? What will bring, I often talk about that we have the core circle, and that's your group of maybe 5 or 6 people that work hard together. Secondly, you have a secondary group, and those are groups that maybe just come to the education events. And then you have a third layer of people, and those are people that read your emails and think they're going to come and plan to come, but don't often get to the meeting maybe 3 times a year. So I think we need to say, really look at what kind of things are really going to attract people, and that we're going to get those resources that we need to bring our group along. I think delegating responsibility is huge. We need to, again, say that this is everybody's group, and we need to delegate and say, this is what I'd like for you to do. This is what I'd like for you to do. I also think that when problems are not solved, and we don't have strategies for solving problems, and they just keep bellowing over and over, and they keep coming back, that we need to think about how do we deal with things. I always say that the first time we deal with things, the second time we deal with things, and I say to the people, I'm willing to spend some time with you as a facilitator of working through that problem. And the third time I say, we need to figure out how to move on from here because we're stuck, and help people move on from the problems that they have so that we can continue our group. Strategies for sustaining a group. I think there needs to be balance in the kind of things that you do. You need to look at both fun and educational and support. I really believe in planning things for the whole year so that people know what they want to do. I think you absolutely have to delegate. We cannot do this alone. We need to make this everybody's group and not just our group. We need to listen and then take action. Again, we need to listen and then take action. What kind of things do our group want to be doing? We need leadership that understands support and volunteers and problem solving and really says we're going to work at figuring this out. And lastly, we need funding. We need to look at some funding sources that will help us to do the kind of neat things that we want to do, and be creative with that and figuring out how to do that. I'm going to lastly talk about taking care of the leadership. I think that it's just important that we take some time to take care of ourselves. If there are some other support group leaders in your community, I think it's great that you could get together and talk about what are some of the leadership issues we need to talk about. I think it's important that we ask for help, that we go to our agency and we say, these are the kind of things that are happening, and I need some help in figuring this out. I just looked at something, as I said, I'm an old social worker. I just got something from the School of Social Work here that talks about facilitating purposeful and engaging activities throughout the life of a group. Well, maybe we need to send our leadership to something like that. And then I think lastly, it's important to be open to change. Ask the questions, how are we doing and how can we improve? What kind of things can we do different to make this our group and to make people feel like this is their group as it is their group? And again, I think, as I said several times, it's really important to have fun. People come to things that are fun. People come to things where they can laugh a little and they can find other people that are supporting them with what they're doing. My favorite quote is that life isn't about waiting for the storm to pass. It's about learning to dance in the rain. And I think that that's one of the things that we have to do in support groups. In ending, I'm going to say a couple of things. I'm going to refer you to the NACAC website, and if you need some other help, go to the CCN work, and that will help you to fill out the Survey Monkey that will, again, allow us to help you get some help that you need. If you can't figure that out, please connect with me or with anybody, with Nathan or with Christina. Also, I'm offering the parents the Starting and Nurturing Adoptive Parent Groups guide if you would like that. If you don't have that, you can download it on our website in publications, or if you would like a hard copy, you can ask me for that. Okay, I want to thank you all for joining. I'm going to see if we have any questions here. So if you have a question, please go and put it in, and I'll see if I can help you. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions. Again, you can email me questions directly if I can help you that way. So thank you so much for joining. I hope you have a great rest of the day, and I hope this was helpful. Thanks a lot.